It was a cold night, and I was watching Slender Man. And then I realized, why am I watching Slender Man? Who watches Slender Man? Am I crazy? Probably, but who watches Slender Man?
He's right. At least it's not Slender Man. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Movie Emporium's movie review of the Happytime Murders, the newest film by Brian Henson, who you might remember from directing stuff like The Muppets Christmas Carol, is the son of Jim Henson, has worked in Muppets and puppets all his life. He's now directing a movie with Melissa McCarthy, Brian Barretta, Elizabeth Banks, Maya Rudolph, Leslie David Baker, who you might remember from The Office, and Joel McHale. So the story of the Happytime Murders is about it's the world kind of like Roger Rabbit, where puppets and humans live together, but they don't get along with each other. The humans are basically racist against the puppets, and they don't want anything to do with them. And the cop, Phil Phillips, who's played by Bill Barretta, he had an incident in his past that's caused the world to pass a law that basically doesn't allow puppets or Muppets, whatever you want to consider them, to be cops anymore. So Phil Phillips has his own agency, and he has his own secretary, played by Maya Rudolph, who's actually pretty amazing in the movie. But he gets involved with a conspiracy against the Happytime Gang, which was this 90 live action TV show that had Elizabeth Banks, and then had a bunch of other puppet characters. It's kind of like what you saw when you were a kid, and you always enjoyed. It was fun, happy, go lucky, whatever. So somebody is starting to knock off these puppets and start to knock off the Happytime Gang because there's if whoever lives at the end, it's kind of like the Simpsons episode where Grandpa, whoever dies, gets to keep all the money. And it's the kind of same thing with this under contract, that they make $10 million, but if everybody dies, the last person living makes $10 million, that type of thing. So they start dying off, and they're connected to Phil Phillips because his brother was one of the characters on the show. And he joins with Melissa McCarthy, who he's partners with in the past. And they don't have a good connection with each other because there's some issues. But it basically tells a story about how they need to solve the murders and figure out who's killing them. And what I liked about this movie is it's an interesting take on racism and Black Lives Matter. And it's also an interesting take about, I read this article last night about how Brian Henson wanted to create a film that talks about how people who create puppets aren't well respected. It's kind of a dying art. So I mean, you look at stuff like The Muppets and The Muppet Most Wanted, they were successful films, but they weren't considered the best of the series. And Jim Henson wanted to create a world with like stuff like The Dark Crystal or Sesame Street or even The Muppets, where you have these felt objects that are created to be lifelike, and they could interact, and they look fun and exciting. And this world gets rid of all that. Brian Henson, who is the son of Jim Henson, was like, no, I'm going to do an R-rated lowbrow comedy, and that's exactly what this is. It's very lowbrow. There's a lot of sex jokes, dick jokes, FUs, and cussing, and very, very violent. But it has this heart where it's trying to tell a story about a guy who is just, he wants to find out who's doing this, but he wants to be left alone. And he's just down on his luck, and he did something in his past that's just come back to haunt him. And I don't know, it's just an interesting take on what is a normalized story of just a detective who did something wrong. And the fact that they're using puppets who are like looked as down upon, I mean, just the way that, things are looked down upon and so on and so forth. It's an interesting idea of what you could do with this type of movie and what you could do with these characters. And it's interesting that Brian Henson is involved with this movie because, I mean, he's known for doing stuff like The Muppet Christmas Carol or Muppet Treasure Island. He's not known for doing R-rated Muppet movies. And then the beginning title credits is this Henson alternative, so this movie's not going to be a typical Muppet movie. But, I mean, it's interesting. Like I said, Phil Phillips and Melissa McCarthy's character play off each other pretty well. She's basically a drug addict, and, that's how these stories go for some reason. But with that, the problem with this movie is you've seen all the jokes in the trailer. And so when they come up on the screen, it's just like, it's not funny. And the stuff that's in there is not funny. And the movie just is so lowbrow that the humor just goes way too much. There's jokes that last for like 2 minutes. You've seen the jokes in the trailer. They expand upon that, and there's incest jokes, and there's all this stupid stuff that I understand that they wanted to make something that was different than the Muppets, but they're trying so hard to be so lowbrow and to create so much sexual content and drugs, and I mean, it's not a very good movie. It's better than Slender Man. I told you guys I would say that because it is. So I don't know what people are saying that this is the worst movie of the year, because it is definitely not the worst movie of the year. You still have fun with it. The characters are still enjoyable. So I mean, I can't, not say that there's not fun to be had in this movie. But it's so stupid. I mean, that's the biggest word to put it. It's just not fun to watch sometimes. It gets very dark. It gets very uncomfortable. And maybe that's what they're going for, but I think the most interesting aspect comes in the credit scene when they show you how the characters were put on screen. They used a lot of green screen with the characters and stuff like that. But just as far as the movie in general, I mean, it goes exactly where you think it's going to go. It does stuff that you really don't want to see. It's really creepy and disturbing. But like I said, that's what they were going for, so I guess maybe they succeeded. But it's just, for what I was expecting and what I got, I expected a little bit more, especially from Brian Henson, who did one of my favorite Muppet movies, which was The Muppet Christmas Carol, and Jim Henson. I mean, you can never be like your father and so on and so forth. But I'm not saying I'm not going to recommend this movie. I'm just going to go in the caveat that goes, if you've seen the trailer, then you've seen the best jokes. If these jokes weren't in the trailer, I think it would have played better. And it does get laughs, but like I said, there are people walking out. I've read stories about people walking out because it's too lowbrow, and maybe it's just like what people were saying, like Sausage Party, which I didn't care for either. So that, I mean, just take that for what it's worth. But for me, this is one of the most disappointing movies I've seen this year. Like I said, it's not as bad as Slender Man. I'm gonna keep saying it. I don't know what people are thinking when they say this is as bad as Slender Man or worse than Slender Man, because it's not. That movie's like one of the worst movies of the decade, and I believe that wholeheartedly. So. But that's my take on the Happytime Murders. Like I said, there are some good stuff to it, but there's mostly more bad stuff than there is good. Characters that don't really need to be in the movie. But with that, thank you so much for checking out our review of Movie Emporium's The Happytime Murders. If you like what you see, as always, remember to rate, subscribe, check us out on YouTube, Audioboom, Facebook, Twitter, all that good stuff. Comment below if you like the movie, tell us about it. I actually would like to see what people thought was funny, what people thought wasn't, so on and so forth. So. But with that, we'll go ahead and see you guys later. Peace.